I'm Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series that features yours truly, Tom Martin. I'm a lifelong journalist. I've produced for ABC News, CBS News, and CNN, and I love meeting interesting people, reading great books, and learning new things. And that's exactly what we do here on every episode of A San Francisco Conservative. And I would like you to meet the author of that book, my co-host, and he's also the author of another great book, Income and Wealth, David Parker. Hey, David, how are you?
I'm fine. Glad to be here.
Great to see you. Great to see you. So I always refer to you as a Renaissance man. You've worn many hats over the years. You're not wearing your hat at the moment, but you wear many hats. You're an investor, entrepreneur, jazz musician, world traveler, and so on. Maybe first and foremost, I don't know, you're an educator. And you tell us a little bit about your experience in education, because something made the news right there in San Francisco that I want to talk to you about. And you're the perfect person to give us some insight into it.
Well, I guess I am an educator because I taught for 40 years and I couldn't get enough. I volunteered for 10 more, 50 years. It's true I didn't teach full time after the first few years because I couldn't afford to teach full time. And I had too many other interests going, but I never stopped, and I only taught inner city schools. And in Marina Middle School in San Francisco, got hit by what I avoided during my whole teaching career, but which not all teachers could avoid, was that they were supposed to be really coddling the children and never really coddling the children. And teachers are supposed to handle problems in the class and not send the student to the office, not expel them, not suspend them, because if you do that, you're depriving them of an education. And the superintendent of public instruction in California gave that directive to all superintendents throughout the state. They are not to suspend students, and their teachers are to handle problems in the class. And without any understanding of the economic consequence of that, social, political, and economic consequence of that, is that after a while, the good students in the class who are quiet, you could call them the silent majority, they can't take it anymore because the teacher is wasting so much time creatively handling students who are misbehaving. And the teachers do that well because they have taken classes in classroom management. Is one of the main elements of training for teachers today is classroom management. You're not expected, and you're to handle problems creatively. That's a skill in its own right. And you find yourself, that's what you're doing. And there's almost no time left to teach. You certainly can't have a well-crafted lesson and have it interrupted 25 times. If it's not interrupted, it's because you're really handling the class well. You can walk into any low-income school today. You don't see kids running around. They're sitting there quietly, but the teacher's got it under control, and the teacher at the end of the day is an exhausted wreck. But the class was perfectly well managed. The students,
maybe if they gave every teacher a taser or something. No, I'm just kidding.
It's as if every teacher had a taser. The kids are not running around, but that's really control. It's a career in itself, and teachers quit.
Yeah. Well, let's take it back. It sounds like a real problem. I mean, my children, my daughter graduated from college 2 years ago. My son is about to graduate, so they're a little farther along. But I mean, when we talk about the grade school level and so on, it sounds like definitely a serious problem. But let's go back a few decades. I like how you started your essay when you talked about what it meant to be a teacher or to pursue a career as a teacher in the 1950s and 60s, the kind of people it was attracting and how they saw their own profession. I mean, things have really changed over the decades.
That applies to college professors also, who enjoy teaching college and enjoy debate in the classroom and find themselves being censored left and right for insensitive remarks. And they've been chasing conservative college professors out of the university. David Brooks, columnist for the PBS NewsHour and New York Times, said At the most, there's 1.5% of all college professors are conservative today. They've been got rid of. It's like sending the Jews out of Europe. They've been got rid of, cleansed.
And I guess it's an obvious point, but certainly, I guess I would call myself more liberal and, voting Democrat and all that kind of thing. But we should all welcome that diversity of opinion, right?
If you don't have it, if students aren't forced to defend themselves a little bit, they don't learn. And that's what you don't learn unless you stand up and speak and have people reaffirm what you're saying, or have people, especially the professors, say that's not true, or what are your facts? Where did you get that idea? That's how you learn. And when professors are afraid to speak, and when administrations from school or superintendents of public instruction tell professors to don't be mouthing off your opinions that are not politically correct, they don't. And that means that professors don't talk to students after class. That's something that people don't think about. Students leave who don't like it, and teachers leave who don't like it, and teachers who stay don't talk to their students after class because they're going to get a reprimand for saying something inadvertently. So students are losing out. The nation is losing out, and the level of instruction is dropping because you can only say certain things that may not even be true.
Yeah. Well, I like the point you made, and along those lines, you pointed out, there you are in San Francisco. I actually was a little kid living in the San Francisco area in 1967, 68, and even when they had the protests on campus and so on, they weren't looking at it like this, right?
You could say there's the old left and the new left. I'm part of the old left myself, even though I'm a San Francisco conservative. That's because I grew up. But when I was younger, I was part of what's the old left, the Mario Savio kind of guys from UC Berkeley, who said, students, throw your bodies on the gears of the university, shut it down, because the university was acting like a parent. They were protecting students from the unhappy events of the world. They were not talking about the war in Vietnam. They were not talking about Jim Crow South. And students were saying, we want to know about these things. Stop protecting us, like treating us like kids. It's the exact opposite today. A university should be a safe space from all those ugly ideas of the world. We don't want to hear anything that we don't want to hear. And the students are winning. They won then. The old left won. UC Berkeley and the whole university system of the United States became a free speech zone, and now it's a censored speech zone.
Yeah,
students won again.
It's quite a dramatic change. I have a follow-up question or two on that, but we're about midway through our episode today. I just wanted to let our viewers and our listeners know that this is a San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin, journalist, and Mr. David Parker, author of Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. And perhaps you're watching this on our YouTube channel, a San Francisco Conservative, the podcast. If not, I hope you'll go there and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. But David, the teachers themselves are looking at the whole profession very differently now than they did, when you started, right? That's another one of the points that you make in your essay on this subject. You say, teaching was and should be a profession and not just punching a clock. And we're losing the best teachers, right?
Well, I'm comparing a profession to a job. A profession is a career that as you mature throughout your life, the lessons you learn, you bring to the work. I mean, an actor, when they get older, get better. And so do athletes and dancers, but their bodies can't do it after the age of 40 or 45. Federer, the great tennis champion, had to quit, but his mind is there. He's probably playing better than ever, but he can't beat those 15-year-old, 20-year-old kids anymore. Just physically, he can't do it. Nobody can. But teaching, it's not a physical thing, it's a mental thing. So I've known teachers who taught the first grade their whole career. First grade is an important, maybe the most important grade, because you're teaching kids really to read And every year, every teacher in June or when school is out are going, whew, I'm glad I'm out of here. But September comes around, every teacher says, boy, I can't wait to get back. So you know you're a teacher if you say in September, not in June, but in September that you want to teach. And you bring the best teachers who teach the first grade for 40 years, every year teach it better. They know more, they teach it faster, they teach it more with more certainty. And their students, every parent wants to get their kid in that teacher's class, everybody knows. So it's a career. And a real career, people, if they train for it and it's so rewarding, truth is people will do it for nothing if they don't get paid. If an actor prepares to Hamlet for 3 years and has a chance to do it, well, we're only going to pay you this much. Oh, I won't do it then. That would not happen. If you had a chance to play Hamlet, you would play it. Mm-hmm. Baseball players in the 1950s were paid so low, so meager, that when they traveled between teams, they took the Greyhound bus and stayed in Motel 6. They weren't paid anything, professional baseball players, but they weren't quitting. That's better than going to Walmart and finding stuff on the shelves. So they were playing on a professional level, by the way, which is very, very high. Only because of television advertising that they all of a sudden the salary went from $100 a year to $100 million a year or something like that. Yeah. But otherwise, gymnasts don't get a lot of money, but they don't stop if they can keep going.
Yeah. So I'd like to think that idealistic young teachers just entering the profession haven't completely died out. But what happens to those idealistic young teachers?
Let me backtrack 1 second. When I was in the 50s and 60s, one reason education was really fine. Milton Friedman, for example, the economist, says, who's ahead of the voucher and choice in public education. He said, I went to public schools. They were fine when I went to public schools. They held a pretty high standard, not as high as Europe or Asia, but it was a much higher standard. And one reason is that at that time, women couldn't find work very easily outside of teaching and nursing. Today, they're in law and they're in every field. They're in medicine and research. They're absolutely equivalent to men. Everybody knows that. But in the 50s and 60s, that wasn't the case. So the really smart people who wanted to get out of the house and wanted some kind of career went into teaching. The level of teaching in the 50s and the 60s was very high because they had really good women. I had a class that inspired me to this day. It was a Harvard grad. It was her first year teaching. Brilliant. And she was teaching American history and with historiography emphasis. And, well, who said this? Go look up the person who said that and verify that he knows what he's talking about. Whoa, there's a whole level up in high school. That's like college level course. That person wouldn't be teaching today in a high school. Maybe not. Maybe not. But the level is dropping. So even now, I don't go back to volunteer anymore because I'm picking up grandchildren left and right. I'm looking at the schools. I don't want to be here. The teachers, they're all filling in that mode, and they're all creatively handling problems and don't hurt their feelings. And we don't say this, we don't say that, and the principals. I don't want to be in that environment anymore.
Yeah. And you're, as a real estate investor, I know you own a variety of properties, commercial and residential and so on. So one of the big factors there, of course, I know, and my wife and I have looked for different houses over the years. Property taxes, large percentage of property taxes in any district in America goes to the public schools. So why is that important when we're thinking about the quality of education?
Most of the tax money, property tax, goes to education. Most does. And parents paying property taxes, and if you're living in San Francisco, property taxes are high because the price of real estate is high. So they're paying, a young couple is paying on a $1 million or $2 million home. That's what it costs in San Francisco. They're paying, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year in property taxes, and they're paying $20,000 to $40,000 a year per child to send them to a public school. That's not fair.
or to a private school.
To a private school, that's not fair.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If we have some kind of a voucher, you reverse that. The bad kids, they go to private schools and get all the attention they need, and the good kids get to go for free in the public schools. That's how it should be.
And no, it makes a good point.
In fact, I'm picking up two of my kids, grandchildren, go to a school in San Francisco, and there are a few really good elementary schools, but most are not. And it turns out that school has a $400,000 a year a budget surplus from parents donating. Every parent just pays $1,000 to go to that school. That's better than paying $40,000. They're paying $1,000. That school hires art teachers who are artists, and the students are learning art, how to really draw, not just let's just draw a round ball and put an eye on it. They're art teachers, and they have science teachers teaching science, and they have PE teachers teaching PE, exercises and yoga and sports. It's on a really high level.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we just have about 2 or 3 minutes left. And I guess the last thing I wanted to touch on is you suggested maybe changing the way that students are graded. Can you tell us a little bit more about that idea?
Well, to encourage students to stay in school and take the pressure off testing and teaching to the test, which is really awful and uncreative. Drop all this testing business, or maybe once or twice in their career take a test, a national test. Let students go with their own pace and then get a grade in relationship to the level they're on. It might be a 5th grade class. Everybody's sitting there. No, an 11th grade class, let's say. All the students are sitting there, and the English work, the student gets a C. And next to the C, it says 3rd. He's on a 3rd grade level, even though he's 11th grade. Math, C+. 4th grade level. PE, B+ for 11th grade. He didn't get an A because he didn't bring his gym clothes too many times. And it's like a soldier coming to work without their uniform. That's how gym teachers look at it. So he got a B+. But he get the 11th grade work. So there it is. And when you graduate, you get a certificate that says you spent 12 years in the public schools. You didn't graduate, but you spent 12 years there, and you passed a few classes. Then everybody's happy. And what you should really do is make public school kindergarten through 8th. That's traditional elementary. High school is 9 through 12. You can't go to high school if you're not at grade level. You go to work.
Yeah. So apparently this California superintendent of public instruction wrote a note, you quote the note in your essay here, basically saying you're being too hard on some of these students. That sounds like that's inappropriate. I mean, after listening to everything you've explained to us here.
I'm not sure he said you're being too hard. He's saying don't expel them, don't throw them out. And that what's the consequence of not doing that? The other kids leave. The parents pull them out. As a school teacher my whole life, I'd come back in September and I'm waiting for my trumpet player, Susie, the best kid in the class. Where's Susie? Oh, she transferred to a private school. Or where's Miss Jones, the best teacher the school had? Oh, she's out of here. She changed careers. Every year, my whole teaching, the best students and teachers, one by one, after 30 years, one by one, a classroom of 30 has no more students left. A school of 30 teachers has no more teachers left, one by one at 30 years. And that's the situation in the public schools. There are no students or teachers left.
Wow.
There's bodies, but bodies, but not really, nothing's happening.
That certainly sounds like an educational crisis to me. So thank you. Yeah.
California was near number 1 when I went to school. Yeah. People moved to California to go to the public schools. Today, and for the last 40 years, it's been between 45 and 48. Lowest in the nation, lowest in the world.
Wow. Amazing. Well, you've certainly shined a light on a serious problem. So we better stop this in its tracks and turn things around. But I want to thank you. I've learned a lot, as I always do, on our conversations. And I want to remind our viewers and listeners to be sure to pick up David's books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. You can do that by visiting his website, davidparkeressays.com, or by going to Amazon. And again, if you're not watching or listening to this episode on YouTube, please go over to YouTube and search for a San Francisco Conservative, the podcast. You hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any episode. We'll let you know when a new one is posted. In closing, David, you certainly, I think our viewers and listeners really got another great sense of the depth of your analysis of contemporary issues with the historical perspective also in this case as well. But would you like to tell them about your books a little bit before we close?
All right, today we talked on education, but in all my books, I bring a historic, we didn't talk historic today particularly, but I always bring examples from history, especially from Greece, from Rome, 1st century, 18th century, Age of Enlightenment. I'm always bringing examples from those periods because they're classical examples, and those people are exactly who we were, and we can learn from the past. And then I'm a person who's been successful in business. So instead of giving examples, academic examples, I give business type examples, or my thought process is that of a person in business. So it runs through my books. It adds a certain voice, and I like to think it holds readers' attention.
Absolutely. No, they're excellent books. And very soon, at the time we were recording this, very soon you'll have your next book out, a book of collected essays. And I highly recommend that also. We're getting a preview of them. And that's what we talked about one of them just now. So thanks, David. Great to see you. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too. Thank you, Tom.